Miles Carter had lived his entire life in a city that never shut up. Sirens, jackhammers, shouting drunks at 2 in the morning, it was a place where silence didn't exist. Every morning, he rode the same crowded train to a gray cubicle job that demanded too much and gave too little. But he was good at saving. No wife, no kids, no reckless habits. He watched his bank account grow slowly, methodically, like a man starving for freedom inching toward the gates. And then, one morning, he didn't show up to work. Instead, he loaded everything important into a rusted pickup, 2 duffel bags, his grandfather's fishing gear, a toolkit, and a small safe that held cash, a handgun, and every important document he owned. He left no forwarding address. No goodbye texts. Just silence. The property he bought was in northern Michigan, an old house that hadn't been lived in for years. 2 stories of wood and stone, weather-beaten but sturdy. The house stood surrounded by towering pines, with a long, sloping backyard that ran into dense woods. Behind the trees, hidden from view, was the crown jewel, a vast, spring-fed lake. Clear water, quiet shores, no tourists, no boats. Just nature. It was everything he dreamed of. He spent his first days cleaning, fixing up the dock, sweeping out the fireplace, and replacing the busted lock on the back porch. At night, he'd sit on the deck with a beer in hand, listening to crickets and staring at stars the city never showed him. By the second weekend, he had fallen into a rhythm. Morning coffee on the porch, hours spent working on the toolshed, evenings walking the deer trails behind the house. And yet, he hadn't taken the boat out once. That changed one Saturday morning when he woke up to a sky so blue it looked painted. The lake called to him, and this time, he listened. He packed a cooler, a thermos of black coffee, and bait for fishing. As he stepped onto the dock, sunlight danced across the water, and for a moment, he felt like the only man alive. Miles pushed the old aluminum boat off the dock, the motor sputtering before catching with a familiar cough. He eased into the open lake, leaving ripples in his wake. And somewhere, far off beyond the trees and silence, fate stirred. The lake was more vast than Miles expected. From the shoreline, it looked like a simple basin surrounded by forests, but once out on the water, he saw the subtle inlets, the curves of hidden banks, the way the trees leaned close like guardians over a secret. The morning fog still clung to the surface, rising in gentle wisps that danced in the breeze. Ducks glided by in the distance, and somewhere in the trees, a loon called out with its ghostly cry. He let the boat idle in the center of the lake for a while. The water was so clear that he could see down into the rocks and weeds beneath. Casting his line with easy grace, Miles settled into the kind of peace you don't realize you need until you have it. Time didn't seem to move here. He didn't catch anything, but he didn't care. He was exactly where he wanted to be. After a few hours of drifting and sipping coffee, he noticed a slow-moving current tugging gently at the boat. It came from the far end of the lake, where the trees grew thick and wild. Curious, he started the motor again and followed it, navigating into a narrow inlet that funneled into a stream. The water narrowed, the motor chugged slower, and soon he found himself moving through a corridor of overhanging branches and moss-covered rocks. The river was beautiful, untouched, quiet, and shaded. It twisted through the woods like a silver vein, its banks lush with ferns and fallen logs. He hadn't seen this part on any maps. In fact, the realtor had never even mentioned it. Probably didn't even know. "Let's see where you go," Miles murmured, curiosity pulling him forward. He followed the river for nearly a mile, marveling at its bends and how the woods grew darker, thicker, older. The fishing rod lay forgotten in the bottom of the boat. This was exploration now, and it stirred something in him that had been asleep for years. Then he saw movement. It was subtle, a shift in the water, a flash of color that didn't belong. He slowed the motor and squinted ahead, heart picking up as he drifted closer to a fallen tree jutting out into the stream. That's when he saw her. At first, he thought it was an animal, clinging to the thick root of the fallen tree, soaked and trembling. But as he got closer, he saw her form, humanoid but not human. She had long limbs, a slender frame, and russet-orange fur that glistened with water. Her hands clung to the bark like claws, and her tail floated beside her in the water. Her head turned, and their eyes locked. Golden eyes. Wide, wild, terrified. "Help!" she whimpered, her voice raw and melodic, like wind through reeds. "Please!" Miles blinked. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. She was beautiful, and utterly alien. A fox. No, something between a fox and a woman. Her ears twitched, tall and pointed, and water dripped from her soaked fur. She was naked, clinging to the tree, desperate. "Jesus!" he muttered, already reaching over the side. "Hang on!" She barely had the strength to lift herself. Miles grabbed her arms and hauled her into the boat. She collapsed in a wet heap, panting, her long hair plastered to her face, her chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. "You're real," he said under his breath. She looked up at him, eyes pleading. "Please, don't let him find me." Miles stared at the creature, no, the woman, sprawled in the bottom of his boat, soaked and shivering. Her fur was sleek, rust-colored with hints of cream down her chest and thighs. Her body, though covered in soft fur, was undeniably feminine. Full hips, a narrow waist, long legs tucked beneath her as she tried to compose herself. She was nude but unashamed, her golden eyes never leaving his. "Who?" He swallowed hard, then cleared his throat. "Who are you?" She clutched her arms around her knees, still shaking. "My name is Arya," she whispered, voice trembling. "Please, you have to take me somewhere safe. He's hunting me." Miles looked behind them. The river was still. No sound except the gentle gurgle of water flowing around the boat. He turned back to her. "Who's hunting you?" "A man," she said. "Tall. Wears metal and camouflage. He has a machine that can track my kind by scent. He found our home. We ran. My family scattered." Her voice caught, her ears folding back against her skull. "I was the last one. I went to the river, thought maybe I could swim far enough, fast enough. But it's cold. I barely made it." Miles blinked, heart thudding. "This is insane," he murmured. "You're real. You're actually real." Arya tilted her head slightly. "Would you have let me drown if I wasn't?" "No. I just..." He shook his head. "I don't even know what you are." Her gaze didn't waver. "Vulpine. That's what your kind used to call us." He opened his mouth to speak but stopped. There would be time for questions later. Right now, she needed help, and whether she was some endangered species, a genetic experiment, or a legend pulled from a fantasy book, she was alive, scared, and soaking wet. "We'll go back to my place," he said, turning the boat around. "You can dry off, get something to eat. But if there's some armed lunatic hunting you, we'll need to figure out how to stay hidden." She nodded, curling tighter into herself, shivering again. "Thank you?" Miles glanced at her again. She was trying to act strong, but her breathing was shallow and her limbs trembled against the cold. He unzipped his hoodie and leaned over, wrapping it gently around her shoulders. "You're safe now," he said quietly. It was the first time she smiled. They reached the lake as the sun began to dip, its golden light rippling across the surface. Miles docked the boat, helped her onto the pier, and draped his arm around her shoulders to support her on the walk back to the house. Her legs wobbled slightly, but she moved with grace, her paws silent on the wood. The closer they got to the house, the more he noticed how she clung to him, not just for balance, but for something deeper. At the back door, he paused. "It's not much, but it's safe." Arya looked up at him, and for a moment the fear in her face melted into something else, gratitude and curiosity. "I don't need much," she whispered. "Just someone who doesn't want me dead." Miles opened the door. The warmth inside the cabin hit Arya like a wave. She exhaled with a quiet, shaky breath as Miles closed the door behind them. The wood stove in the corner still glowed with embers from earlier that morning. He moved quickly to stoke it, tossing in fresh logs, the flames flaring back to life in moments. "Sit," he said gently, pointing to the couch draped in a wool blanket. "I'll get you a towel." Arya nodded, padding across the floor with quiet, practiced steps. The light flickered across her soaked fur, revealing every curve of her form, her wet tail trailing behind like a shadow. Miles tried not to stare but couldn't help it. She moved like something out of a dream, graceful, beautiful, utterly unreal. He ducked into the hallway closet, yanked out a fluffy towel, and returned. "Here." She took it with a smile, then stood before him and began to dry herself, not bothering to hide her body. Her eyes flicked up, amused at his flustered silence. "Does this bother you?" Miles coughed. "It's just, you don't seem shy." Arya tilted her head. "Should I be? You're the first human I've met who hasn't shot at me." "Fair point." She wrapped the towel around herself loosely and sat down, letting the warmth from the fire seep into her bones. Miles walked to the kitchen, still shaken, and opened the fridge. "Hope you're not picky. I can make eggs, grilled cheese, or grilled cheese." "Grilled cheese?" she said brightly. "That's the one with melted squares and butter, right?" He chuckled. "Pretty much." As he cooked, she watched him with open fascination. "You live alone?" "Yeah." "In this house? With this view? This quiet?" That was the point. She leaned back on the couch, tail curling lazily. "I like it. I could stay here." He turned toward her. "That might be dangerous if this guy's still after you." Arya's smile faded slightly. "He always is. His name is Ray. He's hunted my kind since before I was born. He says we're vermin. Abominations. He wants us all gone." Miles frowned, flipping the sandwich in the pan. "Why?" She shook her head. "Some of us used to live near humans. Not many. My parents said people used to think we were spirits. Forest guardians. But Ray, he tracked us across counties. Burned one of our camps. Shot my cousin. Jesus. He's relentless. When he found our last den, we had to scatter. I ran to the water. I didn't think I'd make it." "You did," Miles said quietly. "You're here." He brought over 2 plates and handed her one. Arya took a bite and closed her eyes, letting out a soft moan. Buttery heaven." Miles laughed. "Good? I might marry this sandwich." She glanced at him teasingly. "Unless someone else wants to make a better offer?" He blinked. "You're flirting?" She licked a bit of cheese off her lip. "Maybe. I like your eyes. And your hands." He looked down, self-conscious. "What about them?" "They saved me." She stood and walked toward him, slow and deliberate, her towel slipping just slightly off one shoulder. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And I repay my debts." Miles' breath caught as she drew closer. Then, a knock at the door. Arya froze. Her ears twitched sharply. "That's him." Miles stood slowly, the hairs on his arms rising. "Go. Upstairs. Hide under the covers. Don't make a sound." She bolted without another word. Miles walked to the door, exhaling to steady himself, and opened it. A man stood on the porch, tall, weathered, calm. Camo gear. Gloves. A long rifle slung over his shoulder. Behind him, a military-grade truck idled, its windows tinted, engine low and patient. The man smiled warmly. "Hey there. You must be the new guy." Miles kept one hand on the doorframe to steady himself. The man standing before him had a presence, calm, controlled, but with something cold behind the eyes. He looked like someone used to getting what he wanted. A hunter, but not just of animals. Someone who enjoyed the pursuit more than the prize. "Name's Ray," the man said, extending a gloved hand. "Own the bar just off the highway. Iron Den, figured I'd welcome the new neighbor." Miles hesitated, then shook his hand. Ray's grip was firm, too firm, as if testing strength. "Thanks," Miles said. "I've only been here a couple weeks. Just trying to enjoy some quiet." Ray chuckled. You found the right place. Nothing but trees, squirrels, and maybe the occasional fox. Miles's pulse jumped. Yeah, saw one the other day. Real pretty one, too. Ray's smile widened slightly, as if they were sharing a private joke. You let me know if you see anything unusual. Some folks say they've spotted things in these woods. Not regular animals. I track things most people don't believe in. Like what? Ray patted the rifle slung across his shoulder. Foxes. Not the small ones either. Big ones. Walk upright. Dangerous. Real nasty creatures. If you see anything out of place, you call me. He reached into his coat and pulled out a weathered business card. Numbers on there. Bar's address, too. Miles took it without looking. I'll keep that in mind. Ray stepped back, his gaze lingering on the house behind Miles. You here alone? Yeah. Just me. Lucky man. He gave a final nod. Well, enjoy your peace. Hope it lasts. With that, he turned and walked back to his truck. The engine growled, and the tires crunched over the gravel as it pulled away slowly, deliberately. Even after the taillights disappeared into the trees, Miles stood there for a moment, staring at the card in his hand. It wasn't just a friendly visit. It was a warning. He shut the door, locked it, then bolted it for good measure. Upstairs, he found Arya curled up under the covers, her ears twitching as he entered. She peeked out, eyes wide and afraid. Was it him? Miles nodded. Ray. Said he lives nearby? Runs a bar. Wears camo and carries a rifle like he's still at war. She sat up, pulling the blanket with her. Did he say anything about me? Said he's hunting foxes. Big ones. Her expression darkened. He knows I'm here. Maybe. Maybe not. He could be fishing. I've seen that look before. She whispered. He smells blood. He'll come back. Miles sat on the edge of the bed. Then we can't stay here. We leave tonight. I'll pack what we need. We'll take the old service road, no cameras, no lights. We'll head into the city. Arya hesitated, then reached out, touching his hand. You don't have to do this. He turned to her. You showed up in my life like a storm. You changed everything. And I don't know what the hell this is between us, but I'm not letting that man hurt you. Her voice dropped to a purr. You're braver than you look. She leaned in and kissed him, slow, deep, grateful. When they pulled apart, she smiled mischievously. When this is over, maybe we can talk about babies. Miles blinked. Babies? Just a thought, she whispered, tail flicking. They moved quickly once the sun dipped below the tree line. Miles stuffed clothes, food, and cash into a duffel bag while Arya paced the cabin with restless energy. Her ears twitched at every noise, her golden eyes darting to the windows. She dried off and changed into one of Miles's flannel shirts, oversized, soft, and long enough to hang down past her thighs. Her tail swished through the back, a reminder of what she was even beneath the disguise. You sure this back road goes to the city? Arya asked as Miles slid his handgun into the glove box of the SUV. It's rough and narrow, he said. Old utility trail. Not on any GPS. But if we follow it east, it'll connect to Route 27 just before the first gas station outside of town. Arya nodded, eyes sharp. Good. He won't follow us easily through that terrain. As they loaded into the vehicle, Miles gave the cabin one last look. It already felt like another life. His sanctuary had become a trap. And now, he was about to burn rubber into the unknown for a woman he'd only just met. Because something in her gaze made the decision feel right. They drove with headlights off, guided only by the pale glow of the moon filtering through the trees. The forest loomed on both sides, tall and close, making the road feel like a tunnel. Every snap of a branch, every movement in the underbrush felt like a threat. Thank you, Arya said suddenly. For what? For believing me. For not turning me in. For this. He glanced over at her. I didn't even hesitate. That's what scares me the most. Her voice was soft. You've been alone a long time. He didn't respond. They were nearing the first bend in the trail when a blinding set of headlights flared on behind them. Arya spun in her seat. It's him! Miles cursed and slammed the gas pedal. The SUV roared forward, wheels bumping and sliding across uneven gravel. Behind them, Ray's truck tore through the trees like a beast unleashed, its engine louder, heavier, and built for terrain like this. He was waiting, Arya growled. He knew we'd run. He won't catch us. Branches whipped past, scraping against the sides of the SUV. The narrow trail curved hard to the right, and Miles barely kept control as they skidded around it. Ray followed, closer now, the glare of his high beams flashing in the mirrors. The roar of his engine felt like it was breathing down their necks. He's gaining! Arya shouted. Miles scanned ahead, saw a fallen log across the road. Hold on! He jerked the wheel and veered off the trail, bouncing violently through a shallow ditch and back onto a parallel path. Mud splattered the windshield. Arya clung to the door handle, eyes wide. Ray's truck plowed through the log behind them, splitting it in half. Miles gritted his teeth. This guy's insane. He always has been, Arya said, voice grim. He won't stop until one of us is dead. Up ahead, the trees thinned, and the utility trail met pavement. Almost there, Miles muttered. They hit the road, tires squealing as the SUV surged onto the open highway. Ray followed seconds later, headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. Arya looked at Miles, eyes fierce. Then let's make sure it's not us. Miles floored the gas as they shot onto Route 27, the sudden smoothness of the highway giving the SUV a much-needed edge. The tires gripped asphalt like claws, launching them forward into the night. Behind them, Ray's military-grade truck surged out of the trees like a mechanical beast, its custom headlights slicing through the darkness. Arya twisted in her seat, tail whipping anxiously as she kept watch. He's not falling back. If anything, he's faster on pavement. Yeah, well, we've got range on him, Miles said through gritted teeth. If we can make it to the city, we can lose him in traffic, maybe even ditch the car. But he knows where you live now. He'll trace the plates, look for anything you've registered. Miles cursed under his breath. Then we'll burn every bridge we have. Start fresh. The wind howled past them. Town signs zipped by: Millridge, 18 miles, New Briar, 22 miles, South Haven, 30 miles. Miles kept them steady at 90 miles per hour, the engine groaning under the pressure, dashboard rattling. Behind them, Ray's truck began to close the gap. Then flash. A muzzle flare burst from his side window. A bullet punched through the SUV's rear window, exploding glass across the back seats. Arya ducked. He's shooting at the tires! Miles swerved hard, the SUV lurching across 2 lanes. He clips our tires, we're done! He saw an off-ramp ahead, a smaller rural road that led away from the main drag and into another patch of forest. I've got an idea, he growled. Hold tight. He took the off-ramp at full speed, the tires screeching as they curved into the turn. The SUV bounced as it reconnected with cracked pavement. The trees closed in again, and the road grew narrower, more broken. A sign flashed past: no through access, wildlife preserve. Where are we going? Arya asked, clinging to her seat. I saw it once on a map. This road cuts into a preserve, dead ends at a trail loop. If we ditch the car and vanish into the woods, we might have a shot. And if he follows? Miles glanced at her. Then we're back to running. They flew down the road, Ray following close, but the heavier truck began to slip on the uneven terrain. Miles took turns sharply, clipped a mailbox, and nearly plowed into a wooden barrier that warned of protected lands. At the end of the trail, he hit the brakes and threw the car into park. Go! He shouted. They jumped out, grabbing the duffel bag. Arya's ears perked, scanning the woods, and then she took off into the trees, barefoot, light as a whisper. Miles followed. Behind them, Ray's truck skidded to a stop. A door slammed. Then silence. Miles and Arya crouched behind a boulder, panting. The trees swallowed them in shadow. Arya leaned close, whispering into his ear. "He's hunting again." Miles pulled the handgun from his coat and clicked off the safety. "So let's give him a trail to follow." The forest in the wildlife preserve was old, tall black pines, thick brush, and undergrowth that muffled footsteps. The moon was high overhead but barely cut through the canopy, leaving the ground in a patchwork of shadows. Arya led them swiftly, weaving through the trees like she had been born from them. Miles tried to keep pace, but every snapped twig beneath his boots felt like a gunshot. "Slow down," he whispered. "We don't want to run blind." She stopped ahead, crouching behind a log. Her ears twitched. "He's not coming straight. He's flanking." Miles turned to look behind them, but the trail was already swallowed in darkness. No headlights. No crunch of leaves. "He's tracking us like we're animals," he muttered. "That's how he hunts," Arya said, her voice low. "He lets the silence do the talking. Waits for panic. I've seen him take down families that way. Parents separated from their kids, one scream, and it's over." Miles felt something hard and hot rise in his chest, anger. "No more." He crouched next to her and pulled out his flashlight, holding it close to his chest. "He thinks we're running. Let's make him chase the wrong trail." Arya blinked. "You're going to bait him?" He nodded. "We'll split for a bit. I'll double back, make noise, leave tracks. You circle wide, find a ridge or somewhere you can spot him." Her eyes narrowed, disapproving. "I don't want you alone with him." "I won't be. I've got this." He tapped the handgun. She reached out, pressing a palm against his chest. "Come back. Or I'll never forgive you." He smiled softly. "You're not that easy to get rid of." They split. Miles moved slow at first, then louder, stepping on branches, muttering to himself, rustling brush deliberately. He moved down a slope, toward a shallow stream, then ducked under a fallen log and doubled back, setting up his ambush. He crouched low with the pistol ready, listening. The woods whispered. Then footsteps. Slow. Crunching. Calculated. Ray. Miles's grip tightened on the pistol. The silhouette emerged in the shadows, Ray, rifle slung low, sidearm drawn, scanning the brush with eyes that gleamed beneath a thermal visor. He moved like a machine, fearless, cruelly patient. "Come out," Ray called softly. "You can't hide forever, little fox. You know how this ends." He stepped closer to where Miles crouched. Closer. Miles aimed. Suddenly, a rock flew from the trees, smacking Ray's shoulder. He spun instinctively toward the noise. Then Arya struck. She leapt from above, claws out, catching Ray in the back and knocking him to the ground. They rolled in the dirt, her growling, him snarling as he twisted to throw her off. Miles bolted forward. "Arya!" Ray punched Arya in the gut, slamming her into a tree. She cried out, stunned. Miles raised the pistol and fired. The bullet hit Ray in the side, and he stumbled, but didn't fall. Blood soaked his camo vest. He turned, face contorted in rage. "You think that's enough to stop me?" He lifted his rifle. Arya tackled him again, teeth bared, claws flashing in the moonlight. They collapsed into the underbrush, vanishing into the shadows. Miles ran after them, heart pounding. He didn't know if he'd find her alive. He didn't know if she'd find him again. But he wasn't going to let her fight alone. Miles crashed through the brush, branches tearing at his jacket, heart hammering like a war drum. He could hear them up ahead, grunts, snarls, the crack of bodies slamming into trees. It was a brutal struggle, more animal than man. Ray might have looked human, but in that moment, he was something else. Something rabid. Something that had hunted for so long, he no longer knew how to stop. "Arya!" Miles shouted, ducking beneath a low limb. "I'm coming!" He burst into a clearing just as Ray threw Arya down hard onto the forest floor, his boot crushing into her shoulder. She let out a sharp yelp of pain. Her fur was matted with blood and dirt, her limbs trembling. But her eyes, those golden, defiant eyes, still burned. Ray raised his rifle with both hands, aiming down at her. No! Miles didn't think. He raised his pistol and fired twice. One bullet caught Ray in the upper arm, sending the rifle flying from his hands. The other struck his thigh, and the big man staggered backward, roaring in pain. But he didn't fall. He looked at Miles, really looked at him, for the first time. You have no idea what she is, Ray hissed. Her kind multiplies. They infest. Once they settle, they don't leave. You think she loves you? You're just a vessel. A hiding place. Miles stepped between them, gun still raised. Maybe she's all those things. Or maybe she's just better than you. Ray laughed, blood bubbling at the edge of his mouth. You've already lost. This doesn't end with me. There are others. Whole networks. I'm just the sharpest Fong. Then I'll break everyone. Miles growled. Ray lunged. But Arya was faster. She pounced from behind, her claws slashing through his side as she slammed him to the ground. This time, she didn't hold back. She moved like a storm, years of fear, grief, and fury channeled into every blow. Ray tried to rise, but Arya's knee drove into his chest. Her hand struck his wrist, knocking his knife away. Miles didn't stop her. She pinned Ray, chest heaving, claws inches from his throat. Ray coughed, grinning even through bloody teeth. Do it! Prove me right! Arya's hand trembled. Then she pulled back, eyes blazing. No. I won't become what you are. Ray stared up at her, stunned. Miles approached slowly. He's done. Let the forest have him. Arya rose, and Ray rolled onto his side, gasping, defeated. He wouldn't be walking far. Not without help. Not tonight. Miles helped Arya to her feet. She winced but leaned against him, breathing hard. You okay? He asked. She looked up at him, blood streaking her fur. I will be. They turned and left Ray where he fell, the trees watching silently as two figures vanished into the woods, one human, one not, but both hunted, both changed. They walked for what felt like hours, until the trees began to thin, and the scent of smoke reached Arya's nose. She paused. That's campfire smoke. Miles looked at her. Others? She nodded, hope blooming behind her exhaustion. My people. He smiled faintly. Then let's bring you home. The scent grew stronger with every step, smoke mingled with wild herbs, meat roasting over flame, and something more subtle, more primal. A scent Arya had once known like breath. Her steps quickened. The pain from the fight, the bruises, the exhaustion, all of it faded as she followed the trail through the trees, her golden eyes gleaming in the dark. Miles stayed close, supporting her when she stumbled. His clothes were torn, his boots soaked through, but his grip on her never wavered. They were both scratched, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. Together. They crested a small ridge, and there it was, a hollow carved from nature itself. Nestled beneath the trees, a hidden camp revealed itself in flickering torchlight. Woven huts of moss and bark stood in clusters. Vulpine figures moved between them, tall and lean, their fur colors ranging from amber to ash. Some sat near fires, others stood guard with handmade spears. Young ones played quietly beneath the roots of an old willow. Arya gasped and broke into a run, ignoring the protest from her muscles. A call rose in the air. Arya? A sleek figure bolted from the fire, a female with deep reddish fur and a streak of silver at her muzzle. She threw her arms around Arya, sobbing into her shoulder. Mother! You made it! Her mother cried. We feared the worst. Others gathered quickly, siblings, cousins, old friends. There were more than Miles had expected. Maybe 20. Maybe 30. Survivors. Refugees. Warriors. All of them came forward, embracing her, touching her face and fur, whispering her name like a lost song returned. Miles stood at the edge of the camp, uncertain. Until one of the elders approached, a tall, regal vulpine with golden stripes along his temples. His fur was faded with age, his eyes sharp. "You brought her back," the elder said. "You are not one of us. Yet you fought for her?" Miles nodded. "I didn't even hesitate." The elder studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Then you are welcome." Miles took it, humbled by the strength in the old man's grip. Later that night, they sat by the central fire. Arya was wrapped in a ceremonial cloak of braided vines and feathers. Children curled up beside their parents. Hunters returned from the edges of the woods. The elder told stories in a voice like wind through stone. Arya sat beside Miles, her tail draped over his leg. "You've given me more than I thought I'd ever have again," she whispered. "Safety. Family. A future." He turned to her. "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know." She smiled faintly. "But you've got one anyway." She leaned in, and their lips met, warm and slow, the kiss of two souls who had survived not just a hunter, but the silence of being unseen. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "Stay. This world moves fast and forgets the quiet. But here you'll always have peace. And me." Miles looked around. The fire. The trees. The people. And the wild, beautiful woman beside him. "I never want to leave." And he meant it. Morning came gently to the hidden camp, golden light trickling through the leaves like soft fingers brushing over the forest floor. For the first time in days, Miles awoke without tension in his spine or the looming dread of pursuit. He lay on a bed of woven furs in one of the moss-covered huts, the air rich with the scent of pine and the faint, sweet musk of Arya. She lay beside him, half-curled, tail draped across his chest like a blanket. Her breathing was soft, peaceful. Her injuries were already healing. Her kind seemed to recover quickly, but small bruises still marked her ribs and hips. She stirred as he brushed his hand over her shoulder. Morning already?" she mumbled, ears flicking lazily. "Yeah," Miles said quietly. "But we're still here. Still safe." She opened her eyes and smiled. "Then I guess I don't mind mornings anymore." Outside, the camp was waking. Fires were rekindled, and the smell of cooked roots and smoked fish wafted through the air. Children laughed. Water was poured into carved basins. It felt normal. Not like survival. Like home. Miles sat up slowly, stretching, muscles sore but intact. He still wore the same jeans from the chase, torn at the knee, boots caked in dried mud. Arya, ever unbothered by modesty, slipped a loose wrap around herself before stepping outside into the camp light, tail swaying behind her. The elder from the night before approached with a nod. "You both rested?" "Better than we have in days," Miles replied. "Then come. There is talk to be had." They followed him to the center of the camp where several vulpine leaders sat in a half-circle. One of them was Luca, Arya's younger brother, leaner and quieter than her, with sharp, watchful eyes. "We need to move," said one of the elders, voice grave. "Ray may be down, but he is not the only one. His kind will come looking," Luca added. "And when they don't find him, they'll sweep this region. Hard." Arya sat forward. "We can't keep running. We've done that for years." Miles agreed. "Eventually, there has to be a place where they can't follow. Somewhere hidden, permanent." One of the older women nodded. "There is a place. Far to the west. Deep in the mountains. Old trails. Sacred to us. No human has ever found it." "Then that's where we go," Arya said. The elders exchanged uncertain glances. "You'd lead them?" the golden-striped one asked. Arya looked at Miles, then back to the circle. "Not alone." Miles placed his hand over hers. "We'll go together." The decision was made by nightfall. Preparations began. They would abandon the camp by dawn, heading west through forest paths long forgotten by human maps. Miles helped where he could, fixing packs, lifting crates, checking supplies. The others were wary of him, but respectful. They watched him closely, seeing how he moved with Arya, How he listened more than he spoke. Slowly, they began to accept him, not as one of them, but as hers. That evening, under the soft orange of a setting sun, Arya took him to the highest hill overlooking the camp. "This is where I first learned to climb trees," she whispered. This was home. Miles looked at her, brushing her hair from her cheek. "Then let's make you a new one." She smiled, pressing against him, her fur warm against his chest. "Maybe it already started the day you pulled me from the river." The next morning came with a quiet urgency. The forest air was cool and still, thick with dew that clung to the leaves like tears from the trees. No birds sang. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as the vulpine tribe gathered, their packs slung over their shoulders, their youngest huddled close to the elders. Miles adjusted the strap across his chest, the weight of supplies familiar now. He wore a cloak one of the vulpine women had sewn for him, a patchwork of greens and browns that helped him blend with the trees. Arya stood beside him, dressed in a similar mantle, her ears alert, eyes sharp. The elder gave the signal. Without a word, the group began their westward journey. They moved in silence, each footstep placed with care. Luca led the vanguard, Arya near the center, and Miles stayed close to both. The path was narrow, winding through terrain that hadn't seen human boots in decades. Fallen trees and thick undergrowth slowed them, but not for long. This was Arya's element. She walked with a natural grace, her tail flicking side to side with every step. Occasionally, she would glance back at Miles, offering him a small smile. Even here, surrounded by her people, she looked for him. Checked on him. They traveled for hours. At midday, they paused by a small brook to drink. The young ones splashed and laughed, their earlier silence melting into playfulness now that they were far from the danger they'd left behind. Miles knelt beside the water, washing his face, when Arya sat next to him. "You doing okay?" she asked, brushing her fingers through his damp hair. "I'm not made for long marches through the woods," he muttered, grinning, "but I'll live." She giggled softly and rested her head on his shoulder. "You've already done more than most of my kind ever dreamed a human would." "I didn't do it for your kind," he said, kissing the top of her head. "I did it for you." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Then let's make sure we survive this." Later, as dusk began to settle across the treetops, they made camp in a deep glade surrounded by high ridges. Watchers were posted in the trees. Fires were kept low. Even in retreat, they moved with precision. Miles helped pitch the shelter. Arya, surprisingly strong for her size, lashed the support lines with practiced hands. When the structure was complete, a domed blend of branches and woven mats, they sat inside, wrapped in a blanket, her head resting on his chest. "You don't miss your old life?" she asked quietly. "Not even a little. The house? The job?" He chuckled. "That house felt like freedom at first. But it was just a place. This? You. That's what freedom actually is." She purred softly, her voice low and teasing. "You keep talking like that, I really am going to make you have babies with me." Miles nearly choked on his breath. "You're not going to let that go, are you?" She looked up at him, smirking. "Nope." Outside, the stars blinked awake. Inside, two souls, once strangers from worlds apart, held each other like they'd always belonged. The trek continued for 3 more days. The terrain grew steeper, colder, the trees thicker and older. Moss carpeted the forest floor like a sacred skin, and sunlight filtered through the canopy in slender beams. The air tasted ancient. Here, civilization had never touched the earth. But danger hadn't been left behind. On the 4th morning, the scent of smoke found them again. Arya was the first to smell it, her nostrils flaring. She stood abruptly during a break near a moss-covered bluff, ears rigid. Miles stood too. "What is it?" "Smoke," she said, her voice tight. "Not ours." Luca confirmed it moments later, returning from a scouting path. "Fresh fire pit. Human boot tracks. Less than a day old. They're behind us." A silence fell over the group like a shroud. "They're following Ray's trail," Arya muttered. Maybe even tracking his blood. He probably called them before he went down. Told them where to look. The elder gathered the tribe into a tight circle. We break into two groups. The elders and children go west to the mountain path. The rest of us hold the line. Arya's eyes narrowed. I'm not running. Miles stepped forward. Then neither am I. They left the main trail by nightfall. The warriors, Arya, Luca, and a dozen others, including Miles, set a trap. The chosen place was a narrow ridge flanked by drop-offs, a natural bottleneck where the hunters would have no choice but to slow. They camouflaged themselves in the underbrush. Spears, bows, and salvaged firearms were distributed. Miles checked his handgun. It had one full clip left. They waited. The moon rose. So did the fear. But Arya sat close to Miles in the darkness, her fur brushing against him. You don't have to fight, she whispered. I never wanted to drag you into war. He touched her cheek. I chose this the moment I pulled you out of that water. She smiled, sad and strong all at once. Then if this is the end, I want my last moments to be with you. It's not the end, he said. It's just the beginning of something worth fighting for. Just past midnight, the hunters came. They moved like phantoms, night vision goggles, silencers, tactical gear that gleamed only when the moon caught it right. 5 of them, maybe 6, moving low and silent. One of them carried a thermal drone on a pole, scanning the terrain. Luca gave the signal, a sharp whistle like a bird call. The ambush erupted. Arrows flew from the trees. A trap rope snapped tight, hoisting one of the hunters upside down before he could scream. Gunfire cracked in the night, echoing like thunder through the hills. Miles took aim and fired twice, striking a hunter in the shoulder. Arya moved like a blur, leaping from a rock and knocking another to the ground, her claws raking his arm. She was faster than any of them could comprehend. But they fought back hard. One Vulpine fell, shot in the thigh. Another caught a knife to the gut. Miles ran to cover the injured, dragging the wounded back to safety. The battle raged like fire in a dry forest. And through it all, Arya was everywhere, darting, striking, defending her people with feral precision. She caught sight of Miles reloading behind a tree and sprinted to cover him just as a hunter raised his rifle. She slammed into the man, knocking him down the slope. Miles! She shouted. Go now! He ran to her, heart in his throat. Together, they turned to face the final 2 hunters, back to back, breath fogging in the cold air. They're falling back! Luca called. We did it! The last shots rang out, and the woods went still. Then silence. Then cheering. Vulpine voices rising in relief, in pride, in survival. Miles dropped to his knees, exhausted. Arya collapsed beside him, tail draped over his lap, her sides heaving. You good? He asked. She smiled, blood on her lip. You really want babies with a woman who fights like a demon? He grinned. I wouldn't want anything less. The battle was over, but the forest didn't celebrate. It remained solemn and still, as if it had seen too many wounds open beneath its canopy to cheer just yet. Smoke from scorched branches drifted through the trees like spirits, passing silently among the living. Miles knelt beside Arya as the others tended to the wounded. She winced as he gently brushed a blood-matted lock of fur from her face. A cut along her brow was already clotting, and her lip was split. Let me see your side, he said. I'm fine, she muttered, trying to wave him off. You just took down 3 men, one of whom was twice your size. Let me do this much. She finally gave in with a soft growl and turned. Her cloak was torn at the ribs, revealing a shallow slice across her left side. Miles peeled it back carefully, using a damp cloth from his pack to clean the wound. You're not bad at this, she murmured as he worked. I had a first aid kit in my old truck. Watched a lot of videos. Never thought I'd use it in the middle of a forest war. You've saved my life more times than I can count, she whispered. And I don't think you even realize it. He looked at her, the cloth still in hand. You saved mine, too. When the others regrouped, the injured were stabilized, the fallen honored with silence and soft singing in the old tongue. Luca approached, his shoulder bandaged, a spear in hand. We have to move again. They'll send more. But we bloodied them. That'll make them hesitate. Where's the rest of the tribe? Arya asked, rising slowly. Safe, Luca answered. They reached the stone pass. We'll meet them by sundown if we leave soon. Miles stood with her, slinging his pack back over his shoulder. Then let's go. As they moved west again, slower this time, Miles noticed something had changed among the tribe. The glances from the others toward him were different now, less wary, more curious. Respectful. He wasn't just tolerated anymore. He was part of the fight. Part of them. By late afternoon, the trees began to thin, the elevation rising sharply. Great slabs of stone jutted from the ground like ancient fangs, moss-covered and gray. The sound of water returned, distant falls echoing from somewhere up ahead. As the group crested a final hill, they saw it. The stone pass. A natural corridor carved between towering cliffs, lined with white birch trees and flanked by shallow caves that glowed with firelight. And waiting there, at least 50 vulpine, maybe more. Children ran to meet them. Elders opened their arms. The rest of the tribe had made it. Arya was pulled into an embrace by her mother, who clung to her like something lost and finally recovered. Miles stood nearby, unsure whether to step forward, until Luca nudged him with a grin. She talks about you, he said. Even when she's not. Moments later, Arya broke from the embrace and ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. You're part of this now, she whispered. Whether you like it or not. He held her tight. I'm not going anywhere. As the stars rose that night over the stone pass, a feast was lit. Not a celebration of war, but of survival. And among them, the man who had once only wanted silence now sat beside a fire, wrapped in furs, with a vulpine woman curled against his side, and a family that had claimed him not by blood, but by choice. The feast was unlike anything Miles had ever experienced. There were no plastic cups or paper plates, only woven bowls, clay mugs, and roasted meats wrapped in leaves. Sweet roots, boiled berries, thick stews, and earthy bread that steamed in the cold night air. The food was simple but rich with flavor, and the laughter was something sacred. Children danced in the firelight, their fur gleaming. Warriors retold the ambush with exaggerated flair, miming battles with wooden sticks and dramatic growls. Elder vulpines sang old songs in their melodic tongue, each note rising like smoke into the stars. Miles sat beside Arya on a low bench carved from stone, a mug of something fermented in his hands, strong, sweet, and nearly potent enough to knock him over. He sipped slowly, trying to absorb it all. Arya leaned into him, her tail lazily curling across his lap. It's good to see them like this, she said. Not hiding. Not afraid. He looked at her. The fire cast warm light on her face, softening the lines of exhaustion. They trust you. They follow you. She shook her head. They follow hope. I just gave it a voice. And now they have a place, Miles said, gazing toward the high walls of the stone pass. You were right. It feels untouched. It is, she said. Even in stories, this place was legend. A last refuge hidden by time. He smiled. Then maybe it's where stories begin again. She looked up at him with quiet warmth. What do you want now? Really? He thought for a long moment. A life with meaning. A home that doesn't disappear when I close my eyes. A future where I wake up beside you. She went very still, golden eyes locked to his. Then say it. What? She sat up straighter. Say it out loud. Make it real. That's how we bind things in my culture, words spoken with intent, under the stars. No paperwork. Just truth. Miles set his mug down and faced her fully, the fire dancing between them. I want you, he said, voice steady. Not just here. Not just now. I want to build something with you. Protect you. Wake up with you every day and know that I made the right choice that morning I pulled you from the river. Arya didn't blink. And if my people don't always understand you? If we don't always agree? If life here gets harder? I'll fight for us, he said. Every time. She smiled slowly, no teasing this time, just sincerity. Then she reached out, pressing her forehead to his, their noses nearly touching. Her voice dropped to a whisper only he could hear. Then I say this, I choose you. Not just for tonight. Not just because you saved me. But because you see me, even when I'm not perfect. And I want to spend my life making sure you never regret it. They sat like that for a long time, the warmth between them stronger than the fire. The elder approached some time later and laid a hand on their shoulders. You've spoken words that cannot be undone. Let the forest witness them. Let the stars bless them. And with that, a soft cheer rose from the others who had quietly gathered around, watching. Arya's tail curled around Miles's waist. Guess that's our version of an engagement. He chuckled, breath misting. What happens next? She looked at him with playful fire in her eyes. You sleep beside your mate. And maybe. She leaned in, whispering against his ear. Start planning those babies I keep talking about. He groaned and laughed. You're relentless. She licked his cheek. You love it. And beneath a canopy of ancient stars, two lives, so different, so unlikely, became one. They didn't return to a tent that night. A few of the tribe's builders had begun crafting more permanent dwellings in the stone pass, shaping logs and earth into something lasting. But for Arya and Miles, a spot had been cleared beneath a natural stone overhang, a space just large enough for two, lined with dried grass, thick blankets, and carved wooden bowls for food and water. Not just shelter. A home. Arya moved with a feline grace as she entered first, stretching out on the blankets with a content sigh. Her fur shimmered in the firelight from the nearby torches. Her gold eyes followed Miles as he hesitated in the doorway, unsure whether to sit, to speak, to say something meaningful. But she beat him to it. You don't need to say anything, she whispered, patting the space beside her. You already did. He sat down, slowly lowering himself beside her. Her tail curled around his waist before he even settled. You're warm, he murmured, brushing a hand through the fur along her shoulder. Good. Then I'm doing my job, she said, resting her head against his chest. Vulpine tradition says a bonded pair must sleep close. The body shares more than heat, it shares memory. Memory? She hummed, closing her eyes. Every breath you take, I'll remember. Every beat of your heart beside mine. It's how we stay connected, even if separated. Even in danger. He let silence settle between them, pulling the blanket up over her. I never thought I'd end up here. Here with me? Or here in the woods being hunted by men with rifles? Both, he said, smiling. She laughed softly. I used to dream of what I'd do if I was the last one left. Where I'd go, who would remember me? Then you showed up. Like the forest answered my fear with something unexpected. He looked at her, his voice low. If I'd never taken the boat out that day, I would have drowned, she said, no hesitation. Or worse, been taken alive. And you would have spent your life in silence, thinking it was peace. His throat tightened. She reached up and brushed her claws lightly over his chest. But you didn't. You found me. And I don't want to waste a second pretending we weren't meant for this. Arya shifted onto her side, facing him, her form silhouetted by the moonlight pouring in from the cliff edge. Miles? Yeah? I want to have your kits one day. Not because I owe you. Not because we're running. But because I want a future that looks like you and me. Something wild and good and new. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then let's build that future. Whatever it looks like. They lay in silence, hearts pressed together, the world outside hushed beneath a blanket of stars and wind and stone. And though the danger had not vanished, and the road ahead was long, for the first time since he left his city life behind, Miles truly rested, not just with his eyes closed, but with his soul unguarded. Because he knew she would be there when he opened them again. The days that followed brought a strange blend of serenity and tension. The stone pass was the safest place the tribe had known in years. The cliffs guarded their flanks. The nearby streams kept them fed and bathed. Arya often woke before sunrise and returned with her fur damp from the cold waters, her hands full of herbs, berries, or carved wooden tools she had helped shape with the elders. Miles adjusted surprisingly fast to the new rhythm. He chopped wood. He learned to cook over stone fire pits. He even helped teach a few young vulpine how to whittle with the small folding knife he'd kept since his teenage years. To the tribe he became the silent one who moved like stone, a nickname born from his quiet diligence and the way he never wavered when danger came. But peace never stayed long. One evening, as the sun painted the cliffs in hues of amber and rose, a scout returned, breathless and bloodied. "They've burned the forest behind us," the young vulpine rasped, clutching a wound in his side. "Miles east. Smoke rising from the old trail. Hunters. Not many. But they're driving something toward us." The council gathered at once beneath the central overhang. Arya and Miles sat among them, no longer as strangers, but as voices to be heard. "It's not a direct assault," Luca said, arms crossed. "They're pushing animals, maybe drones. Trying to force us out or watch for movement." "They want us to panic," Arya said. "They're hoping we scatter like before." "But we're not like before," Miles added. "You've fortified this place. You know the terrain. This time, we don't run." Some nodded. Others looked fearful. The elder with golden striped fur stepped forward. "We hold our ground. But we will not shed blood in the open unless there is no choice." Arya leaned forward. "Then we make this a trap." They planned late into the night, routes, escape tunnels, fallback points. The warriors would hide high on the ledges. The hunters would lead wild game into the trees beyond the cliffs, confusing the heat signatures of the approaching machines. Miles would lead a small party to plant false trails, boots, fur clippings, anything to mislead. By moonrise they were already moving. Arya pulled Miles aside as he prepared to leave. Her arms wrapped around his chest as she pressed her forehead to his. "Promise me something." He touched her cheek. "Anything. If they breach the cliffs, if you're separated, don't try to be a hero. Just survive. Find me later." He smiled gently. "You don't want a hero? I want you," she whispered. "Not your ashes." They kissed slowly, with the weight of everything unspoken wrapped in that one quiet act. Then he left into the dark, shadow to shadow, carrying both a rifle and the promise of something more than war. Behind him, the first faint glow of smoke touched the stars. The smoke came at dawn. Thick and acrid, it rolled through the valleys east of the stone pass, curling over trees like fingers searching for prey. Birds fled. The wind turned foul. From his vantage on a high ledge, Miles could see them, 3 trucks, 2 drones, and 7 men in gear not unlike Ray's. Not a massive force, but enough to finish the job their fallen leader had started. He clutched his rifle tighter. Below, the tribe was ready. Traps lined the ravine floor. Spear-firing mechanisms were hidden among rocks. Arya crouched with the cliffside warriors, her body low and taut, bow drawn, eyes focused. She was no longer just a survivor. She was their shield. The first drone passed the outer ring, and vanished in a flash of sparks as it hit the cloaked trap net Arya and Luca had rigged days before. A cheer rose behind the cliffs, but Miles stayed quiet. The humans regrouped, warier now, forming a tighter wedge as they advanced on foot. Then came the second wave, smoke grenades. Flashbangs. Pounding boots. But they didn't know the terrain. As they reached the narrowest choke point, 2 curved stone pillars flanking a high ledge, Miles stood and fired. His bullet struck one of the lead soldiers in the shoulder, spinning him to the dirt. The rest ducked, but it was too late. From the trees above, vulpine warriors dropped like shadows. Chaos. Screams echoed through the gorge as attackers were pulled into ambush pits, snared by nets, overwhelmed in hand-to-hand combat. Lucas slammed a man into the rock face, snarling. Arya launched herself from a high branch, landing on another with a feral growl. Her arrows found targets even in smoke. Miles kept his ground, firing precise shots until the clip clicked empty. Then it was quiet. 5 humans lay bound or unconscious. 2 had fled, limping, 1 wounded by Arya's claws. The drones were nothing but scrap. No more came. The forest was still again. Later, as the prisoners were escorted away for release far from the pass, stripped of weapons, blindfolded, sent back with a warning, Arya stood with Miles on the overlook. Her fur was streaked with dirt and blood. His shirt was torn, and a shallow cut lined his arm. They said nothing at first. Just breathed. Together. Finally, Arya spoke, her voice raw. "We don't have to run anymore." Miles looked out over the cliffs, toward the horizon. "And we don't have to fight anymore either." She reached for his hand. "We build now." He squeezed it. "Let's start tomorrow." Spring came gently to the stone pass. Snow melted into singing brooks. Wildflowers burst through the mossy ground, painting the cliffs with hues of violet and gold. Birds returned to the trees with songs that hadn't been heard in years. The war, the fire, the fear, they had passed like a storm. And in their place, something new was growing. Peace. Miles stood in the center of the village, his hands wrapped around a cedar staff he'd carved himself. Children ran past his legs, giggling, a blur of fur and laughter. They called him Stonewalker, now, half affection, half joke, since he was always reinforcing walls, carving steps, or hauling slabs like he never got tired. His shoulders were broader. His beard was fuller. His soul no longer sagged under the weight of loneliness. A hut was being built on the south ridge, larger than most, with 2 rooms, a cooking fire, and a perch above the trees. Arya designed it herself. Her claws had shaped its beams. Her tail brushed his side every time she passed, teasing and warm. And now she stood barefoot before him, her stomach slightly rounded, her golden eyes brighter than ever. "It's happening," she said softly, placing his hand gently against her belly. He felt the faintest movement. Like a heartbeat not his own. Like hope with bones. "You're sure?" he asked, voice cracking. Arya smiled, leaning her head against his chest. "I've been sure since the moment I kissed you in that bed after you saved me. My body just caught up." Miles held her close, overcome by the stillness around them, the kind of stillness not made by silence, but by peace earned. "Do you think they'll look like me?" he whispered. "No," she said with a grin. "They'll look better." They laughed, and for a long time, they just stood like that, breathing together beneath the sun-dappled canopy, surrounded by a world that had once tried to break them. Later that night, the entire tribe gathered. It wasn't a ceremony. There were no speeches, no rituals. Just a fire, food, and stories. Stories of survival. Of a girl pulled from a river. Of a man who traded silence for something louder, love. As the stars blanketed the sky, Arya curled up in their new home beside him, tail wrapped protectively over her belly. "You know," she murmured sleepily, "you never did say yes." "To what?" he asked, brushing his hand through her hair. "To babies." Miles kissed her temple. "Yes. 1,000 times." She purred softly. "Good." The fire crackled low, the forest breathed slow, and in a place untouched by maps or machines, a family began, not by bloodlines or species, but by choice, and love, and the promise of a better world. Together. Forever.